when you stand up and get ready to take a blow, you have the confidence that you can accept the blow.
As a point of interest, none of my men wear protection in the groin. None.
After all, you wouldn't want your attacker to get injured.
That hurt my foot.
Let's go ahead and get the show started here, folks. I was just enjoying the sights and sounds of an FC Dallas home match. It'll be a few months before 2024 kicks off, and before that, those sights and sounds are back with us, whether you're there in the stadium or you're watching on Apple TV at home. Welcome, everyone, to Afterburn Soccer Show, our final show of the year, our final podcast. Welcome as we break down just a flurry of FC Dallas news and kind of look back at the whole season. I'm Nathan Hill. You can follow me at Nathan J. Hill. You can follow Ishmael there in the middle. Welcome him back at Belcora Ishma on X, I guess now. And our buddy Jose Carmona at El Chico Carmona.
What's up, everybody?
Thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah, where's my other dad? All right. Yeah, there he is. So, yeah, we have some stuff. So, let's just talk about overall kind of where we're going to start. We'll start by looking back at the season as a whole. And I'd just love to hear both of you. We've had some distance now to think about this season and the complexity of it and how you would grade FC Dallas overall. But then today there was a press conference featuring FC Dallas head coach Nico Estevez and general manager Andre Zanota, and have a couple of clips that we can get into a little bit later. They made roster decisions, no major surprises there, but we'll get into that. And then more importantly today, a big time signing that we'll talk about this kid, Enes Sali, and kind of what his promise is for this team. So. Let's just start off by looking back at this season. Ishmael, will begin with you. As you know, how do you think FC Dallas did? It was a weird year. It was a hard year. Injuries definitely played a huge impact on this team. As you look back, are you satisfied with FC Dallas's performance, considering, or you think FC Dallas didn't achieve their full potential?
I think both things can be true. It was kind of a meh season. We had 7 points less this year than we did last year. That's not really what you want the sophomore year of your new head coach. But that's not what you want when you invest more money and bring in more players into a roster that did very well last year. And it wasn't like last year we overperformed. We performed at a level that I think everyone expected us to with the players that we had. Players that we brought in, like Legit and Ariola, performed at a high level. This year, we had a substantial amount of injuries. We had players like Ariola and Legit underperform. And because of that, we did worse this year than we did in 2022. It's like based off of what happened with injuries and how extensive they were. I guess you can say that's fine, and you can look back at it and accept it. But honestly, it is still disappointing. It can be both things at the same time. With this being, I think it's an interesting turning point right now for Nico, because this is kind of it's kind of in the same spot that Lucci was, where Lucci did pretty good his first year, all things considered, and then the second year did a little bit worse, and then the third year did a lot worse, and so it's an interesting pattern to notice, and hopefully it doesn't continue as it did with Lucci.
Yeah. Jose, your thoughts?
Well, I have to disagree with Ismail. On one hand, he's right that this is a disappointing season. I'm not going to argue that. But as far as last year finishing fourth, even with all the additions, nobody thought we'd finish that high. So I think we overperformed last year. And because of that, it set us up for higher expectations this year, which weren't met. Now, yes, the injuries can be blamed for part of that issue, but it's on Nico's shoulders. In all honesty, he convinced the owners and Sonata that he could do with a shorter roster, with a smaller roster, and because of that, this team really wasn't very deep. So when the injuries hit, they didn't really have the personnel that could help them out, and that's something that Nico has to learn going forward. That because of the League's Cup and all the added games and whatnot, a short roster simply isn't going to work. He's going to have to go out there and field a much deeper roster. And I'm not saying that that's possible. We don't know. Our hands seem to be a little bit tied. But if he continues to preach a short roster, then we're going to be right back here next year.
And I mean, like based off of that, like even if I disagree with you with the concept that we overperformed in 2022, whether we overperformed or performed as expected, I think that becomes the expectation. That's the baseline, right? And like, I mean, Leggett played well last year. Areola played well last year, but they weren't lighting up the lead. Jesus maybe was something that couldn't be replicated because that's like he was the top scorer in any season of FC Dallas history. Maybe that was something we couldn't expect as a continuance to this year. But I think that these other players, they have salaries that should match the performances that we saw last year, and so. Yeah, I mean, it's not something we can't always expect that every player performs at a high level each game, but I mean, a lot of them didn't in a lot of games this year, and it's just maybe disappointing is too negative a connotation, but it just feels too. It feels too like it's happened before. Like these sophomore slumps for managers has happened time and time again, and I just again if it matches the Lucci trend, that's going to be a difficult 2024, and I hope it doesn't.
I think Lucci lost the confidence of his team. I don't think Nico's there yet. But I will say my biggest disappointment for this season was the drop points at home. Just too many drop points at home, just simply unacceptable, regardless of the reason for it. They went out and performed well on the road. So to see them go out on the road and play well and then come home and not play well, that's just simply something we can't have. Fortress Frisco had a lot of breaches this year. And that should be the biggest thing they need to work on, regardless of what they plan to do with the roster. They need to make Frisco a place where teams come to drop points, and that's what I need to see from Nico next year.
That's good stuff. Well, let's go and jump into some of those comments. First of all, I asked Nico right at the beginning of the press conference, just sort of about looking back at the season, what were some areas of need that the team can improve on, and here's his answer.
I'll start, Nathan, with your question. I think, as Andres said, is a lot of learning. This year, it was the first year that the schedule looked like different in MLS. I think all the teams we have learned things. one of the things we've learned is the decisions that we made last year and how we strengthened the roster help us to achieve the playoff. And because as you notice, all the teams struggle with injuries, and we were also one of them. And we felt like the roster was strong enough to help us to get into the playoff. And then the positions, I think, is something that Andre also will address. Is we look at the players that we have to make decisions on them, and then the areas that we have to improve. As we always said, we want to keep strengthening the roster, and it will depend on the needs in the positions that we have to do. One thing that we for sure know is we want to score more goals, and we want to be a more aggressive team on the offensive side. And it's something us as a staff, we also can help the team to be better on that side.
So they want to definitely strengthen. Definitely want to strengthen the offensive side, which makes sense. I mean, I think in these press conferences, it's rare that you hear coaches will just say, "Oh, we want a new central defender. We're going to get this kind of player," rather that they're keeping their cards a little close to their chest and they don't want to upset players and things. But on the other hand, the defense was solid, and you have that core returning defense going into 2024, including one of the best keepers in the league. So maybe it makes sense. Hey, we want to make sure our attack is even stronger and we're scoring more goals than before. It makes sense. And I think the new signing also probably helps that out a little bit. But just before we kind of shifting from that, were you all surprised by any of the roster decisions that FC Dallas made? I mean, the big two notable guys released: Jose Martinez, central defender, and Facundo Quinon, a defensive mid. Both had their contracts were not exercised, and so they are on their way out. A few guys are getting negotiated with. Hyder Obrian is included in that. Jimmy Moore as a backup for another season. So that's ongoing. I have a little clip, I think, about that coming up. But yeah, any surprises on the roster decisions from your perspective?
I mean, I was kind of surprised that they brought back Siki based off of how far he fell. He's very good roster value because he's pretty good at a very low salary, but like they just did not use him. I think that letting go of Quignon and Martinez, and I anticipate that O'Brien probably will probably not come back, is expected. I think that was what had to be done. There are special moments, especially with Quignon, because he scored a lot of. He scored like a couple of goals in those like big clutch moments, and he did a lot better this year than he did last year. But I mean, we are trying to build a roster that competes in playoffs. That's meant the hump that we just haven't been able to get over. Just making one that competes in playoffs, that wins maybe not just one playoff game, but maybe two playoff games. We just haven't seen that in a while. And I think that getting that roster space, that cap space, is important. I mean, the biggest surprise was letting go of Colin Smith and keeping Herbert Enderley, in my opinion. But
Agreed.
But that's so minimal. I thought Colin Smith did pretty good at Birmingham, but it is what it is.
Yeah, some interesting decisions, and Jose, before I get your response, let's hear him talk. Well, go ahead, Jose. I guess I realized this clip may be different.
I agree. I mean, the biggest surprise for me was that they allowed Colin Smith. They didn't bring back Colin Smith, considering you're going to have Giovanni Jesus injured to begin the season, and you need someone behind Tomasi. Now they're bringing back Enderley, and letting go Smith, and that just kind of blows my mind. It must be a money thing. The Hunts like to save money. So Colin Smith, if you look at both their seasons, and Colin Smith was teared up in USL Championship, and Italy was hardly seeing minutes. And so you have to wonder why that decision was made. So
Yeah.
I'm surprised. They could have used him, but my guess is they said we can't keep them both. One of them's got to go, and they chose to go with Italy instead. Uh, my other surprise, although I really shouldn't be surprised, is Korka that they're negotiating with him. But I think that has more to do with the fact of just how thin the back line is. That you need a body there, and so if they can bring him back, you know, for the year, and then load him down to North Texas at some point. But I think that's more like an emergency. We need bodies there, and we don't have any.
Yeah.
But other than
Also,
that, that's
the other one that I think is interesting. People are clamoring for them to complete the discussion is for them to bring back Jimmy Maurer. But I think we're at a turning point with Antonio Carrera where if he's not the backup, at the very least on this team, he's going to be gone. Because he's played so well with the youth national team, and he's played consistently with North Texas. And I think that that's kind of something that they've had to, if they want to have Carrera here for at least 2 years, he needs to be at least the backup to Paz. And I think that.
well. I think it depends on what their plans are for Carrera. I mean, if they intend to loan Carrera to the USL Championship, then bringing Maurer back would make sense. But if they're not going to do that, if they're not going to loan him out to the USL Championship, then bringing Maurer back doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, based off of roster, how much the roster got thin this year and how many things happen next year, I think that the second keeper will get minutes. And so at this point, they have to decide whether or not they think Carrera is good for those minutes. It might be only like 4 or 5 games this year, or if he isn't. And I think that this might be a point where Carrera might be thinking, do I just ask to leave? And that's something they probably don't want to. They don't want Carrera to go. So I think that they really. I think it's interesting that Jimmy is still in discussions. But I do think that at this point, Carrera and his team, his family is a very sports-oriented family, want Carrera to get minutes at a professional, like a high professional level.
Yeah.
And so it's not surprising that that kind of discussion is happening.
And also, we all visibly saw that Maurer has dropped off,
Yeah.
and that's only going to continue. So I agree that they definitely should make Carrera the backup. And well, time will tell.
Yeah, and Zanota indicated that they're in conversations. They made offers to those players, Korka, and to Moore and to Hyder Obrian, but that doesn't mean that that they're going to. Those guys are going to sign those deals. I mean, it's an ongoing negotiations, and Zanota was pretty clear that, like, hey, the conversation's happening, but there's no guarantee, there's no timetable. So we'll see. I mean, of those, I think bringing back Hyder would be fine, but maybe you'll let him walk. Maybe it's time.
I just want to add speculation. I just want to add speculation that with the fact that they brought back Siki and they're negotiating with Hyder, my guess is they both must be close to getting their green cards and not counting as international roster spots, because that would be really if that's the biggest knock against both of them. They're not starters. They're going to be backups, and you don't want backups taking up international spots. So my guess is if they brought back Siki and they're negotiating with Hyder, it's because they got to be close.
Well, also, Obrian might realize he's not a starter next year and might realize that he has value to another MLS team as a potential starter, given that he actually performed above expectations this year. So if the club doesn't have him in the plans to be a starter, that could be another factor. where
Agreed.
but they're offering Oberon a lower number, and Oberon's like, well, maybe there's a really crappy MLS team like the graveyard of FC Dallas, ex FC Dallas players, Colorado, who would take me. And
Come
so
on, you wanted to say Austin. You can say Austin. It's okay.
there's multiple. We have NFL.
Yeah. Well, so one of the interesting things is for FC Dallas, which is both, I think, a positive and a negative. Although a lot can happen between now and the start of the season, is that you really do have already a mostly full roster. And so that was a question that came up, and certainly there are about 3 players that are definitely in conversation for green cards, and that could happen very soon or down the line, which would alleviate some international roster spot finagling that the team will have to do. But it doesn't leave a lot of room, although Quinón and Jose Martinez's contracts were on the larger size, and so there is some movement there, possibilities. But here's Zanotto when we asked him about when Drew from Big D asked him about the space in the roster.
And we've had players that we wanted to move and ended up staying. Other players that we didn't want to move in the past and ended up moving them because we had good offers. So you never know, like what's going to happen. We feel good about the roster we have, the players we have. We need to make some minor adjustments to one. Tom, I'm not sure. I was thinking I didn't reply, but there is a possibility of still bringing one more DP player. So we're going to make those changes that we feel are necessary in to make this stronger group. But at the same time, as I mentioned, I think our group is strong enough. If we manage to keep them all healthy throughout the season, I'm sure we can compete and we can face any opponents in MLS. So, but yes, we will. We let's see what happens in the market in the next month or a couple months.
So there might be movement. I mean, that's something we're all thinking about, the future of Jesus Jimenez, who was just really awful, I think, over this last season. Certainly had his injuries to deal with too, but also, the future of Sebastian Letjet and even a Paul Arriola, and when those moments are right to trade players. He in an earlier answer, he sort of hinted that in this past season that FC Dallas moved players that they didn't plan on moving and didn't want to move, but offers came in that were good, and I think that references Edwin Cerrillo and Brandon Cervania. And so it seems that they have an open door. Like if someone comes in with a strong offer for Arriola or for any player on this roster, they could consider it if it helps the team get better.
Can I add something though?
Sure.
Because initially I was concerned that they only really released 3 players, and that's really not much movement. But let's remember that as Sonoda mentioned, that there's talk of adding an additional DP slot to the rosters, and there's talk of increased salary cap. You have to think that there's got to be talk of increasing the roster. So I want to think. I'm not saying that all this is going to happen. I'm just saying that FC Dallas may be simply holding their cards tight to their chest and saying, "Hey, we need to wait to see what the changes are going to be before we make any big decisions. So we're going to make the simple decisions now, and then wait to see what we're going to do with Jimenez or some of these other players." So I have to think that being how conservative FC Dallas is, that they may be waiting to see what the changes are going to be officially, instead of just talk,
Sure.
before they make any actual decisions about what the roster is going to look like next year.
In fact, Zanota mentioned in the press conference that he'll be in Phoenix next week to meet with other executives, and they'll be talking about some of those changes. And one of the questions I asked them at the end, I didn't pull it up that clip, but may use it on the website later this week, is getting both Nico and Andre's opinion, which about this thing that came out of the Philadelphia Union. GM also lifted it up, this idea that MLS teams with all this congestive schedule of all these games and injury issues, they just need more options on the roster. They need a deeper roster. They need more tools and flexibility to put competitive teams out there. And so maybe there'll be some big changes coming into 2024 to encourage teams to deepen the talent pool available to them.
They don't even really have to increase the roster. They can just simply make changes to the way teams can bounce back and forth between the reserve teams and the senior team, make it easier, make it more possible. And if that happens, if you make it easier to move players back and forth, it would then embolden teams to stockpile talent in their reserve teams, which we've seen some teams try to do that already. In some teams, not a lot, just a team here and there. St. Louis last year, for example, Charlotte this year. You've seen some teams try to stash a talented player or two in the reserve roster, and if you make it so that players can bounce back and forth freely or with with not a lot of limitations, it would embolden teams to strengthen their roster, their reserve rosters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but I mean, I also think that it's very likely there is some major roster rule change happening in that meeting that Zanoda is going to in this next week.
And I want to believe that, but I mean, can they do that without the players association? Without
I mean,
them.
there's probably been discussions. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, Messi's arrival changed a shit ton, and I mean, at this point, there's probably been discussions over the last 6 months that he's been here about what could be changed and what can't be changed. It's like everything in MLS that MLS HQ does. It's gonna be decided very late. I mean, the trade window opens up next week, and the fact that this is still a rumor about possibly happening next year and it hasn't been decided is kind of wild. But I mean, that's par for the course. It's MLS. I think that there is maybe not the DP spot. I have a feeling DP spot might be added in 2025. But that's too drastic of a change, and like with this very little time frame. But I anticipate like maybe the cap goes up. Maybe there is a little bit looser rules when it comes to movement of MLS Next Pro and MLS. That would help MLS Next Pro grow, which is another goal of MLS. So that would kill two birds with one stone. I just think that there's going to be a drastic change or two that we find out by next week.
And I think simplification of certain rules would also help, like the U22 initiative. How many you could have was tied to the number of and type of DPs that you had. They should just eliminate that and just make it a flat. You can have, your 3 U22 initiatives regardless of what you have for DPs. Simple as that. Just simplifying rules like that, making it easier to make decisions with your roster would go a long way.
No. Simplifying MLS rules is way too complicated.
Yeah,
That's MLS bread and butter.
Any surprises in MLS Cup finals from you two? The Los Angeles FC against Columbus Crew. I mean, my biggest surprise was how well Cincy played, and then just how they just collapsed. They just ran out of gas and had nothing.
I mean, Wilfred Nancy is probably, I'd say, top 2, top 3 coach in this league at this point. He's incredible. The stuff that he's been able to do with that roster, there's really good top-end talent, but I mean, he makes subs like Sean Zawatsky in the second half, and that changes the game. That's wild. That's incredible. He's playing Rudy Camacho at center back and a left back at another center back position. And he's still able to do what he does in this league. That Crew team was incredibly fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Nancy probably will go to Europe in the next year or two. Like, he's really been that good. They they kept the pressure on, and since even after going down 2-0 on a free kick goal that should not have been a free kick, and just kept pushing, and it was very interesting to see Cincy's defense slowly crumbling. Like they were holding out strong at the beginning, but
It's a deep
man,
cut from Hoach there. Yeah.
I I want to say that Miazga sealed Cincinnati's fate. His the whole. I mean, that's the last thing you want right before a final is all that distraction going on,
Yeah.
and I'm not surprised Cincinnati collapsed. They played well, and I could have seen them winning, but as far as I'm concerned, Miazga sealed their fate, and I didn't even bother watching the game, and I was not surprised that Columbus won.
it's 2023 MLS Defender of the Year, Miazga.
Yeah.
Yes,
He did
yes,
not deserve that. That should not have been his award, but
Well,
yes.
all right. Well, let's get to the big news. A U22 signing for FC Dallas. I thought this was interesting. It's a risk. It's a 4-year deal, but Ines Sali, and I'm gonna throw up some highlight clips from him as we talk about him. Young, he's 17 years old. He'll turn 18 in February. But has made a mark already in the top flight in Romania, but comes also from out of Canada, Toronto area. A really interesting guy, touted as one of the best products, one of the best players in his age range. A big signing, but also a signing that's going to take time. What were y'all's reactions to the signing of this youngster?
well, I don't think it was very much a risk at all. Like this is a player that if he's good, he's good. If he's not, you let him go in those after those 4 years. Uh, like his numbers aren't great. He's only got like 5 goals in like 2-3 years, but he's only 17, and I mean, he's not going to be the starter. It's not like the U22 signing with Giovan Jesus, where they expected Jesus to be the starter by the end of the year. Like that's not what this is. This is a player that is very young, that multiple top European teams have been looking at to sign in the next 2 years, and FC Dallas are just giving him a chance. Like he's not going to start this year, I don't think, unless he really is that good. Which, if he's only scored 5 goals in 50 games in the Romanian league, I doubt that he's that good right now. But he probably will be a starter by late 2025 or 2026. And I mean, he seems like a good player. We'll see how he grows over the next year.
Well, I want to say that I do kind of agree with Ishmael, but at the same time, you're talking about a teenager who's playing with adults. That by itself is impressive. He's already capped by the Romanian national team in an actual qualifier, not some friendly. And so this kid's he's what listed as one of the top 60 players in his age class. There are currently only 3 players, including himself now, in the MLS that fit that distinction. So this is a top tier prospect, and I applaud FC Dallas for going out and getting him. There's no guarantee that he'll amount to anything. I understand that, but this is the kind of moves you want to make when you pride yourself as a team that likes to bring in and develop players and sell them. This is the kind of talent you want to sign. You know, this is not. I love the kid we had from Hungary. What's his name? Sable, and this kid is on another level compared to him. So on potential, mind you, on potential productivity, he's a young player. Uh, we can hope that he'll come in and he'll hopefully produce for this team at some level, but there's no guarantee of it. We understand that. But as far as going out and acquiring a top tier prospect, this is a top tier prospect. And it's nice to see FC Dallas land one. They've been going after Romanian prospects they've been linked to several. I think Haji was the last one that they tried. That according to rumors that they tried, and that was verified by Haji's father, I believe, who said that FC Dallas had made an offer and that was an unrealistic offer. So that doesn't mean that they came close or anything, but they've been showing interest in trying to sign players from that area, the young players, and they finally landed one. And I'm excited about it. This is the kind of players that, yeah, sure, maybe they don't answer anything, but it shows that FC Dallas does actually go out and try to sign top talent, young talent. We wish they would have that kind of tenacity towards high-end established talent, but this is who this team is.
Well, let's jump over to Nico on this signing and the timetable he kind of suggests.
Andre, from when I came here, it does really well. It's try to anticipate in the market to detect young talents to bring here. And it was a great opportunity for the club and for the future. And, as we always said with the young players, and we have Bernard Camungo as a case of that, even that they are young, and we have to be patient, and we have to help them, as you said, adapt to a new country, but not that new because he's from Canada. He lived in Toronto for a long period also. And his family will be closer than in Europe sometimes, and I think the adaptation will be a part of something that we don't expect an issue. But on the soccer side, he plays a style of play that, and we play a style of play that he fits very well. And as the case of Bernard, his learning process and the way that he does things will dictate how much he's going to contribute to the team and how much he's going to help. Then we cannot put dates. We cannot say it is medium, long term. It's just to let him do their thing, and we'll help him to put a good platform to him to develop and be an important player for us in the present and in the future. On the technical side, he's a winger that is very vertical. He can come inside. He's good dribbler. He can combine and has really good tools that are exciting for our team. He'll help us to make these quick attacks that we are well known in the league, and it will give us speed and threat to the opponent's backline. Also, he works hard and has a great mentality, and he wants to be the best player that he can be. And he's young. He has a lot of ambitions and energy.
So there you heard Nico talking about this signing, and I think he does fit. And this is the question in the chat here from Hoj. I think he does fit the needs of the club. I mean, if you look at some of the Twitter commentary about him, he does have some similar negatives that a guy like Fabian Castillo had when he came to Frisco. But just decision making in the final third. Running out of options, dribbling himself into an issue. So I think earlier on, is this a replacement for Haider Obrian? But he is young and he has a lot of upside, and so I think there's room for this to grow. And his dribbling skills look really nice, and could be a nice asset across from Bernard Camungo for this team.
And I mean, this is definitely, like I said before, this is an investment. The expectation is not that he's going to walk in first game and light the league on fire. I mean, the rumored transfer was, I think, $3 million. This is the club though saying that they expect him to return in value either or in the performance at some point in the next 4 years, or in the transfer out. That's how the Hunts think, that they think about the return in value, and so. He's very high prospect. It will still probably be Ariel on one side, Camungo on the other side for the start of the year.
Sure.
Just based off of this kid being 17 and needing a little bit more time to develop.
I actually think that he is Velasco's future replacement. He's been brought in. He plays in a similar style, similar position, and likes to cut in just like Velasco does. I think he's a guy that you bring in and say, okay, Velasco, he's going to be here another year, two tops. And in that time, you're already working on his replacement. You're already saying, hey, let's become a team that produces players on the wing. And I think this is what this is. This is a player that basically was brought in with an eye towards the long future and saying, hey, look at the contract, 4 years. So when I say he's Velasco's future replacement, I'm saying I mean that. I'm saying they're gonna, hey, let's have this kid develop behind Velasco. So when Velasco's gone, we already have the next player to step up for him available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, and by the way, in the press conference, speaking of Velasco, there's no plans to put him on the season ending injury list, or they're gonna keep him. They believe he might get back better. They're staying in touch with him, and there was also this question asked, I think, from Buzz at Third Degree about concern about Allen's comments on a sports program down there in Argentina about kind of coming back to Independiente. Oh my gosh.
Independiente.
Yeah, my words are failing me tonight. But and while that was evidently, there was a little conversation with that club reached out to his agent, but it was never it never went very far, and it was just he loves his hometown club, and he was wanting to help them out, but he said, Zanotta said, there was nothing to be concerned about there at all. It was kind of just a story. But yeah, so but overall things are looking a little more positive for Velasco, maybe to be ready to go a little earlier in the season than. But of course, everything might change. You never know if he has a setback, what the team may have to do at that point. So it'll be interesting to watch as we begin the season to see kind of where he is and in his coming back from that tough injury.
And I just want to add that while on some level, Buss's suggestion of putting him in the IR makes sense, from FC Dallas's point of view, it makes no sense at all, because you want to get him before the end of the season. You're gonna be getting basically a player who has the potential to be a playmaker for you, and you want that. Even if you only get him for a couple of months, even if it's not 100%, you still want him on your roster and you want him available, because in theory he'll be back for the playoff push, which is when you really need him the most. And that's, I never really agreed with the whole put him on the IR thing. I understand monetarily why that would make sense, but in reality, if this kid can come back and help you at the end of the season, you want him available.
All right, well, good stuff. Well, look, I think we need to leave it there. It's dinner time here in the Old Hill household. Thank you, Ishmael. Thank you, Jose, for your contributions over this past year.
Thank you, guys.
We'll be regrouping. The site will be a little bit quieter over these next few weeks. There's not so much to write about, but you'll see a few more pieces go up as we head toward and take over into the new year. But appreciate everyone. Appreciate all our viewers and all the comments and questions. All right.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.